For as long as he could remember, his entire existence had been defined by a single passion. He had been hailed as a once-in-a-generation genius, a prodigy destined for the global stage. The media swarmed him at every turn, eager to capture the rise of the nation's next superstar. But behind the flashing lights and endless praise lay a lifetime of absolute dedication. From the moment he was a toddler, his eyes had been locked onto the black and white ball. At his first birthday celebration, while other children reached for money or thread, he grabbed the soccer ball without hesitation. As he grew, the pitch became his sanctuary, a place where he could outrun any shadow. He played with a pure, unbridled joy, flashing a bright smile after every victory. His shots were precise, tearing through the air and leaving goalkeepers completely helpless. It was no surprise when he was recruited into the elite youth academy, standing tall among the best. Yet the pressure of expectation began to weigh heavily on his young shoulders. He wore the legendary number 17 jersey, a symbol of the team's ultimate playmaker. But with that honor came a relentless, suffocating anxiety that never truly left him. He pushed his body past its breaking point, running drills until his lungs burned. Even in the pouring rain, he danced through obstacles, perfecting his touch and vision. On the match field, his movements were electric, slicing through defenses with ease. He possessed an extraordinary ability to read the game, seeing passing lanes before they even opened. But his obsessive drive often alienated him from his teammates, who struggled to keep up with his pace. Clashes in the locker room became frequent as his frustration boiled over. They accused him of being selfish, of playing a game that only existed in his own head. Despite the friction, his talent was undeniable, earning him a spot on the national youth squad. He stood in the grand stadium, ready to show the world the true depth of his genius. But during a crucial international match, a sudden, sharp pain flared behind his eyes. He clutched his head, his vision blurring as the roar of the crowd faded into static. Before he could make another play, his legs gave out and he collapsed onto the cold turf. He writhed in agony, screaming as a dark void threatened to consume his consciousness. When he finally woke, he was in a sterile hospital room, surrounded by his devastated parents. The doctor held up a skull scan, his expression grim as he delivered the life-altering diagnosis. Congenital brain malformation meant that any physical exertion could be fatal. His father listened in stunned silence, the weight of his son's shattered future crushing him. His mother wept openly, burying her face in her hands as their dreams turned to ash. He tried to smile to tell them it was okay, but the hollow look in his eyes betrayed his despair. As his mother held him tight, he realized his life as a soccer player was officially over. In the quiet of the night, he let out a silent, agonizing cry for the dream that had been stolen from him. Years passed and he lived a mundane, empty life as an ordinary office worker. His only connection to his past was his childhood friend, who had gone on to become a superstar in Europe. He sat in a quiet restaurant, watching his friend's highlights play on the television screen. Seeing his friend wear the jersey of a top English club brought a bitter tang of regret to his chest. He drank heavily, trying to drown the persistent ghost of what could have been. His friend looked at him with deep concern, wishing he could ease the silent pain. Some wounds were too deep to be healed by kind words or shared memories. He made a self-deprecating joke, trying to laugh off the awkward tension hanging in the air. Eventually, the alcohol took its toll, and his friend drifted off into a deep sleep. He carried his friend out of the restaurant, stepping into the cool night air. After sending him off safely in a taxi, he stood alone on the deserted street. He clenched his fist, wondering if he would ever find a purpose in this dull, second-rate existence. As he walked home, a sudden downpour began to slick the asphalt. The pedestrian light blinked green and he stepped onto the crosswalk, lost in thought. He ran to get out of the rain, his wet shoes splashing in the puddles. But a sudden, blinding flash of headlights pierced the darkness, followed by a deafening crash. As his body was thrown through the air, his vision faded into a peaceful, quiet blackness. When he opened his eyes, the sterile hospital room and the wet city streets were gone. He was sitting on a dusty dirt field, surrounded by the familiar sights of his youth. He looked down at his hands, realizing he was wearing the uniform of Dongil High School. A wave of disbelief washed over him as he realized he had traveled back in time. His high school teammates stood before him, complaining about a missed play just like before. Woo-young smiled, a spark of hope igniting in his chest for the first time in years. When the whistle blew, he stepped up to the ball, his adult mind and perfect technique perfectly aligned. He dribbled past the defenders with a grace and speed they had never seen before. With a sudden, powerful motion, he unleashed a brilliant, golden pass that sliced through the entire defense. His teammate slid in, connecting perfectly with the ball to send it screaming into the back of the net. The field erupted into wild cheers as his teammates ran to celebrate the unbelievable play. Woo-young stood in the center of the pitch, tears of joy streaming down his face. He had been given a second chance, and this single, perfect pass would end up changing his entire life. The referee blew the final whistle, sealing Dongil Hai's 2-0 victory over Sushin Hai. As the players began packing up their gear on the concrete stands, the atmosphere was filled with the quiet chatter of a successful match. While his teammates bid each other farewell and headed home, Wooyoung remained seated alone on the steps. Clutching his knees, he let his head hang low as the weight of his reality finally began to sink in. His shoulders trembled uncontrollably as tears of overwhelming relief and disbelief spilled onto the concrete. Staring down at his youthful, uninjured hands, he realized that he had truly traveled back to his high school days. A mixture of sweat and tears covered his face, but a bright, hopeful smile broke through his exhaustion. He clenched his hand into a tight fist, swearing to himself that he would not waste this miraculous second chance. Just then, his teammate approached him with a lollipop in his mouth, wondering why he was still sitting there. Wooyoung quickly looked up, trying to hide his emotional state and play it cool in front of his friend. His teammate stared at him with a mixture of confusion and mild concern, sensing that something was different about him. But Wooyoung's mind was already drifting back to the incredible pass he had delivered during the match, a play that felt entirely natural to his experienced soul. He playfully raised a finger, joking with his teammate to ease the tension and keep his secret safe. With a casual wave, his friend turned to leave, his silhouette framed by the warm glow of the setting sun. As soon as his teammate was out of sight, the playful expression vanished from Wooyoung's face, replaced by a gaze of absolute determination. The empty school field stretched out under the orange sunset, quiet and peaceful after the day's excitement. Soon, night fell over the city, and the windows of the apartment complexes began to light up one by one. Wooyoung stood in front of his family's apartment door, his heart beating with a strange mix of nostalgia and nervousness. He reached out and carefully pressed the familiar passcode into the digital keypad, a sequence he hadn't used in years. Stepping inside, he kicked off his shoes and took a deep breath, savoring the comforting, familiar scent of his childhood home. The living room was exactly as he remembered it, clean, warm, and filled with a sense of safety he had long forgot. In the kitchen, his mother was busy preparing dinner, completely unaware of the emotional journey her son had just been through. She turned around with a warm, welcoming smile, greeting him with the gentle affection he had missed so dearly. At the dining table sat his father, quietly reading the evening newspaper in his usual stern manner. His father lowered the paper, looking slightly surprised to see his son back home so early. A steaming pot of kimchi stew sat in the center of the table, surrounded by delicious side dishes and freshly cooked sausages. Sitting down to eat, Wooyoung felt a deep sense of gratitude, determined to protect this peaceful life at all costs. He stuffed his face happily, eating so quickly that soup dripped down his chin, making his mother laugh. His father watched him silently, chewing his food with a thoughtful, unreadable expression. Sensing his father's gaze, Wooyoung looked up, meeting his eyes with a calm and mature confidence. The silence between them grew heavy as his father prepared to speak, likely about Wooyoung's future in soccer. Suddenly, Wooyoung's chopstick slipped from his hand, clattering loudly against the table. Both of his parents stared at him in shock, surprised by his sudden, intense shift in demeanor. He lowered his head slightly, his dark hair casting a shadow over his eyes as he gathered his thoughts. When he looked back up, a confident, almost fierce grin was plastered across his face, signaling that he was ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, the bright sun illuminated the school's main field as the team gathered for a practice match. Standing on the sidelines, the head coach watched intently, holding a clipboard to evaluate the players' performance. Wooyoung and his teammate put on their red training bibs, exchanging a few words of encouragement before heading onto the pitch. With a loud shout, the referee signaled the start of the match, and the ball was kicked off into the center circle. Wooyoung immediately controlled the ball with an effortless touch, his body moving with the grace of a seasoned professional. His eyes scanned the field, instantly analyzing the positions of both his teammates and the opposing defenders. Green-bibbed defenders began to close in on him, attempting to pressure him into making a mistake. But with a swift, calculated movement, Wooyoung chipped a perfectly weighted pass over the midfield line. The ball sailed beautifully through the air, carving a precise arc directly toward the open space on the right flank. His teammate sprinted forward, tracking the ball's trajectory with absolute focus. He looked up, amazed by how perfectly the pass had been placed right into his path. With a soft thud, he cushioned the ball on his chest, bringing it down under complete control. He immediately burst forward, accelerating past the first defender with a sudden turn of pace. An opposing defender rushed over to cover the gap, desperate to stop the attack before it reached the penalty area. But the winger simply grinned, confident in his ability to beat his man in a one-on-one situation. The defender lunged in with a sliding tackle, but the attacker was already a step ahead, skipping past the challenge. He quickly crossed the ball back into the box, looking to find an onrushing teammate. The ball floated high over the defenders, heading toward the center of the penalty area. A red-bibbed striker leaped to meet it, but the ball was slightly too high, sailing past him. Seeing the play unfold, Wooyoung made a sudden, explosive run from deep midfield to exploit the space. He sprinted with everything he had, his eyes locked onto the falling ball as he anticipated its landing spot. The defenders tried to track back, but Wooyoung's movement was too intelligent, leaving them completely out of position. His vision narrowed as he focused entirely on the ball, his instincts as a genius midfielder taking complete control of his body. In his mind's eye, a golden path of light illuminated the exact trajectory of the ball and the perfect spot to strike it. The golden beam shone brightly across the pitch, guiding him toward a spectacular finish. He planted his foot firmly on the ground, preparing his body to unleash a powerful volley. With a deafening boom, his foot connected cleanly with the center of the ball, sending it hurtling toward the goal. The ball tore through the air with incredible velocity, leaving a trail of golden light in its wake. It bypassed the goalkeeper's desperate dive, heading straight for the top corner of the net. With a satisfying thwack, the ball slammed into the back of the net, marking the beginning of Wooyoung's unstoppable rise. The physical education class continued on the dusty school ground, where a simple line marker cart sat quietly on the sidelines. On the field, the intensity of the practice match was reaching its peak as the players pushed their physical limits. Wooyoung's teammates struggled to keep up with the sudden shift in momentum, their lungs burning as they chased down the ball. But as soon as the ball came to a stop beneath his foot, a strange stillness washed over the entire pitch. Standing tall under the bright blue sky, the young midfielder looked down at the pitch with absolute clarity. He could see every single player's movement, calculating the perfect trajectory before anyone else could even react. His eyes locked onto a narrow opening in the opposing defense, a path that only a genius could perceive. With a sudden burst of acceleration, he bypassed his marker, leaving the defenders grasping at thin air. It was as if a brilliant aura surrounded him, guiding his movements with supernatural precision. A powerful surge of energy seemed to crackle across the dirt field, signaling the arrival of a truly game-changing play. The ball erupted from his foot with a thunderous impact, wrapped in a blazing trail of golden light. It tore through the air, carrying the hopes of his teammates and the sheer force of his awakened talent. The striker watched in awe as the perfect pass arrived right at his feet, practically begging to be finished. With a confident smirk, the forward prepared to strike, his eyes reflecting the golden brilliance of the pass. He connected cleanly with the ball, unleashing a powerful shot that left no room for the goalkeeper to react. As the ball hit the back of the net, the striker let out a triumphant roar, celebrating the spectacular goal. He clenched his fist in pure excitement, realizing that playing alongside Wooyoung made everything feel effortless. Wooyoung simply smiled, pleased to see his vision translate so perfectly into a successful play. High above the field, the school's head coach watched the entire sequence from his office window. He stood silently, holding a warm cup of coffee as he analyzed the young midfielder's incredible vision. Taking a slow sip, the veteran coach couldn't help but feel a deep sense of intrigue. A knowing smile spread across his face, realizing he had just witnessed a rare, generational talent in action. As the sun began to set over the city, casting a warm orange glow across the neighborhood, school finally came to an end. After an exhausting day, the boys decided to stop by a local street food stall to recharge their energy. His friend eagerly squeezed ketchup onto a freshly fried hot dog, talking excitedly about the match. In a dramatic display of gratitude, the boy jokingly kneeled down to present the delicious snack to his savior. Wooyoung happily accepted the offering, taking a large bite as he listened to his friend's endless praise. Even to him, the sudden leap in his own abilities felt almost too ridiculous to believe. As they walked home together, the casual banter helped ease the lingering tension from the intense practice. Yet Wooyoung couldn't shake the feeling that the coach's watchful eyes were still lingering on him. Suddenly, a heavy hand patted his shoulder, startling him out of his deep thoughts. His friend grinned, reminding him that they had a major challenge waiting for them the very next day. Wooyoung looked back with a nervous sweat, wondering if he was truly ready for what was to come. The name of their next opponent echoed in his mind, a formidable rival that everyone feared. But he quickly brushed off the anxiety, offering a confident laugh to reassure his companion. The next morning arrived, and the school grounds were filled with an unusual, tense atmosphere. In the locker room, the players began their pre-match preparations, stretching their fingers to relieve the tension. They warmed up their muscles, knowing that today's match would require every ounce of their strength. Outside, a large pink bus pulled up to the school entrance, its brakes squeaking as it came to a halt. The doors hissed open, and the first pair of clean white cleats stepped down onto the asphalt. Clad in striking red and black striped jerseys, the powerhouse team began to file out of the vehicle. Their faces were serious, radiating the intense pressure of a team accustomed to absolute victory. Wooyoung and his friend watched from a distance, feeling the immediate shift in the air. Cold sweat ran down the young midfielder's cheek as he sized up the imposing opponents. Just then, the opposing team's head coach stepped forward, his presence alone commanding respect. He greeted the home team's staff with a polite but highly competitive smile. The visiting coach glanced toward the field, his sharp eyes scanning the young players for any potential threats. From across the dirt pitch, Woo-young kept his eyes locked on the rival coaching staff. He swallowed hard, realizing that the level of competition was about to skyrocket. Their own coach simply grinned, seemingly thrilled by the prospect of a challenging match. Soon, the team gathered around the tactical whiteboard as the coach began to outline their strategy. He pointed to the formation, explaining how they would counter the opponent's aggressive offensive style. The players listened intently, their faces grim as they realized the sheer difficulty of the task ahead. Woo-young whispered to his friend, pointing out a potential flaw in the defensive setup. His friend gestured back, highlighting the key players they would need to mark closely. On the board, the red magnets represented the opponent's formidable starting lineup. Woo-young stared at the board, his mind racing as he tried to visualize the flow of the game. He knew that a single mistake in his passing could lead to a devastating counterattack. His eyes drifted to the name of the opponent's star defender, a player known for his ruthless tackling. Other key names on the board only served to emphasize the immense gap in experience. Stepping closer to the board, Woo-young pointed directly at the midfield zone, proposing a bold adjustment. He offered a reassuring smile to his teammates, trying to lift their spirits before the whistle blew. From a distance, the coach watched the team's discussion, pleased to see the young midfielder taking charge. He crossed his arms, confident that his tactical plan would put their opponents on the defensive. A sly smirk appeared on his face as he anticipated the surprise his secret weapon would deliver. Finally, the players stepped onto the pitch, the weight of the upcoming battle settling heavily on their shoulders. Taking a deep breath, Woo-young swallowed his nerves, ready to show the world the true power of his killer pass. The world of youth football was vast, filled with countless prestigious academies and clubs all vying for the ultimate glory. Among them, only a select few teams possessed the talent and prestige to truly stand at the pinnacle of the sport. On the dusty pitch, a fierce battle was already underway between Dongil High School and their formidable opponents. Woo-young watched intently as the opposing number 10 moved with incredible speed, keeping the ball glued to his feet. With a sudden, sharp movement, the striker tapped the ball away, slipping past the defender's desperate challenge. The air was cold, and the tension on the field was palpable as every player gave their absolute all. Standing calmly amidst the chaos was Seoul's genius playmaker, a midfielder renowned for his unmatched vision. With a subtle adjustment of his glasses, he locked onto his target and prepared to orchestrate the next attack. He swung his leg back and struck the ball with perfect technique, sending it soaring high into the sky. Woo-young looked up, his eyes tracking the incredible arc of the pass as it sailed effortlessly over the defense. The sheer precision of the ball's trajectory left everyone on the field momentarily breathless. Woo-young felt a cold sweat run down his neck, realizing just how high the level of competition truly was. The opposing playmaker offered a confident smile, fully aware of the psychological pressure he was exerting. Later that night, the quiet of the neighborhood was broken only by the soft glow of a computer monitor in Woo-young's room. He spent hours analyzing game footage, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he searched for any weakness. He stared at the screen, studying the profiles of the elite players who had already tasted championship glory. With every click of his mouse, the sheer scale of the challenge ahead became more and more apparent. Yet instead of feeling discouraged, a spark of intense determination began to burn deep within his eyes. Collapsing onto his bed, he let out a long sigh, letting the fatigue of the day finally wash over him. A confident grin spread across his face as he imagined the thrill of facing such elite opponents on the grand stage. Back on the pitch, the physical battle reached a boiling point as players threw themselves into every challenge. Woo-young leaped high into the air, contesting a crucial header with everything he had. The impact was fierce, a testament to the uncompromising nature of high-level youth football. On the ground, defenders slid in with desperate tackles, determined to protect their goal at all costs. Woo-young gasped for air, his body aching from the relentless pace of the match. He narrowed his eyes, refusing to let the physical toll distract him from his ultimate objective. Suddenly, the opponents launched another rapid counterattack, their movements perfectly synchronized. With a swift flick of the boot, the ball was sent wide, stretching the Dongil defense to its absolute limit. The opposing winger met the cross with a powerful header, directing it back into the danger zone. The attacking line surged forward like a tidal wave, leaving the defenders scrambling to recover their positions. Another header redirected the ball, keeping the play alive in a brilliant display of offensive coordination. With a clean strike, the midfielder sent a low pass cutting straight through the penalty box. The ball zipped across the dirt, perfectly weighted for the arriving striker. The striker controlled it with his first touch, displaying the calm composure of a seasoned goalscorer. He pinned the ball under his foot, freezing the defender in his tracks with a clever feint. With a quick tap, he laid the ball off to his teammate, completely dismantling the defensive line. A confident smirk played on the striker's lips as he realized the defense was completely at their mercy. He unleashed a devastating shot, striking the ball with immense power and precision. The ball flew like a rocket, leaving a trail of dust in its wake as it flew toward the top corner. The goalkeeper leaped with all his might, stretching his arm out in a desperate bid to make the save. But the shot was simply too perfect, slamming into the back of the net to break the deadlock. The opposing players erupted in celebration, while Wooyoung stood frozen, staring at the celebrating rivals. The stark reality of the gap between their teams settled heavily over the Dongul players. Even their coach could only watch from the sidelines, his expression grim as he witnessed the opponent's dominance. During the subsequent break, the atmosphere around the Dongul bench was incredibly heavy. The players sat in silence, eating ice cream to cool down, but their spirits were completely crushed. They stared blankly at the ground, overwhelmed by the sheer tactical superiority of their opponents. One of the midfielders looked up, his eyes reflecting a deep sense of helplessness. But Wooyoung refused to let the defeat define them, his mind already working on a counter strategy. As the whistle blew to restart the match, he surged forward with the ball, his pace catching the defenders off guard. He drove deep into the opponent's half, shielding the ball with his body as defenders closed in. With a sharp cut inside, he created a sliver of space, ready to unleash his secret weapon. He looked up, scanning the field for any teammate making a run into the box. The opposing defenders rushed to block him, realizing the danger too late. With absolute focus, Wooyoung prepared to deliver the killer pass that would change everything. He knew that this single play would decide the fate of their team in this grueling tournament. The high school field stretched out under the bright blue sky, buzzing with the intense energy of the ongoing match. Wooyoung stood on the sidelines, his forehead drenched in sweat as the sheer weight of the game pressed down on him. Retreating to the concrete bleachers, he slumped down and clutched his head in frustration, feeling the sting of their current predicament. Suddenly, a sharp tap on his head broke his train of thought as his teammate playfully struck him with a lollipop. His teammate stood over him holding a bag of sweets, offering a light-hearted distraction from the suffocating pressure of the tournament. The two sat together on the cold steps, exchanging quiet words of encouragement to ease the tension. Wooyoung gestured animatedly, explaining his frustrations with their opponent's defensive structure. His friend listened quietly, casually unwrapping the candy and placing it in his mouth with an unbothered expression. But beneath the casual banter, a spark of determination began to reignite within Wooyoung's eyes. With a loud crack, his teammate bit down on the hard candy, signaling that it was time to get serious. Standing up, his friend walked back toward the pitch, leaving Wooyoung alone with his thoughts once more. Wooyoung rested his chin on his hand, deeply analyzing the tactical flow of the match. The sharp, echoing blast of the referee's whistle cut through the air, calling the players back to the battlefield. Stepping back onto the dirt field, Wooyoung found himself surrounded by the opposing team's red and black jerseys. He took a deep, stabilizing breath, locking his gaze on the ball with unwavering focus. Gritting his teeth, he clenched his fist tightly, promising himself that he would not let this opportunity slip away. With a sudden burst of energy, he dashed forward, his cleats kicking up dust as the play resumed. Sweat dripped from his brow as he pushed his body to its absolute limits, desperate to close the gap. Memories of their grueling training sessions flashed through his mind, reminding him of everything they had sacrificed to stand here. He accelerated into a full sprint, his movements becoming a blur of pure determination. The opposing midfielder moved quickly, his heavy footsteps thudding against the hard ground as he protected the ball. Wooyoung closed in rapidly, shadowing his opponent's every move with relentless pressure. With a quick flick of his boot, the opposing player sent a sharp pass across the midfield line. But Wooyoung refused to back down, staying glued to his mark to disrupt their offensive rhythm. The red and black striped jersey player cut inside, trying to shake off Wooyoung's tight defense with a sudden burst of speed. He released another rapid pass, the ball slicing cleanly through the midfield. On the opposing side, the playmaker in glasses panted heavily, his stamina beginning to wear thin under the relentless pace. Seeing the fatigue in his opponent's eyes, Wooyoung realized that this was their golden opportunity to strike. He threw his body into the fray, shielding the ball with his physical strength to secure possession. The two players collided back-to-back, locked in a fierce battle of wills for control of the midfield. In his mind, the tactical board shifted constantly as he calculated the optimal passing lanes. The glasses-wearing midfielder gasped for air, his vision blurring slightly from the exhaustion of defending Wooyoung. He let out a frustrated shout, realizing that Wooyoung's tactical awareness was far beyond what they had prepared for. With a heavy thud, the ball was cleared downfield, keeping the high-stakes battle alive. The opposing defender gritted his teeth, feeling the pressure mount as their lead began to crumble. Shouts from the sidelines echoed across the field, demanding a quick pass to relieve the pressure. Watching from the elevated walkway, the head coach stood silently, while a scout wearing sunglasses approached him with a knowing smile. The two men leaned against the railing, their eyes locked onto the pitch as they evaluated the player's potential. On the field, Wooyoung continued to harry the opposing playmaker, refusing to give him an inch of breathing room. The scout commented quietly, noting how Wooyoung's positioning perfectly shut down the opponent's transition play. He adjusted his sunglasses, highly impressed by the young midfielder's exceptional reading of the game. The head coach remained silent, taking a slow sip from his cup as he carefully weighed the scout's words. Wooyoung matched his opponent stride for stride, his determination fueling every step of his run. His chest heaved as he fought through the physical exhaustion, his focus entirely locked on the ball. On the bench, his teammate watched with a serious expression, silently cheering for Wooyoung to break through. With a heavy stomp, Wooyoung planted his foot and drove forward, initiating a rapid counterattack. A confident smile spread across his face as he realized his teammates were perfectly positioned for the attack. The opposing playmaker looked on in sheer shock, realizing too late that they had fallen into Wooyoung's trap. Desperate to stop the play, the defender lunged forward to make a sliding tackle. But Wooyoung's teammate leaped gracefully over the challenge, keeping the ball moving forward. The opposing players watched in disbelief as their defensive line was completely bypassed in an instant. Players from both sides scrambled across the pitch, their movements frantic as the play neared the penalty box. The substitute bench erupted in cheers, sensing that the decisive moment of the match had finally arrived. With a powerful strike, the ball was sent flying toward the goal with incredible velocity. Wooyoung sprinted forward to follow the shot, ready to capitalize on any rebound. He drove deep into the final third, his eyes tracking the trajectory of the ball with absolute precision. The opposing defenders froze in sheer panic, completely helpless against the speed of the attack. They scrambled backward in a desperate attempt to cover the open space, but the damage was already done. A golden shimmer seemed to fill Wooyoung's vision as the perfect path to victory laid itself out before him. His eye glowed with a brilliant golden light, reflecting his absolute mastery over the pitch. He glanced back toward the bench, catching the eye of his coach who watched with quiet anticipation. A knowing smile touched his lips as he prepared to deliver the final, devastating blow. With a brilliant flash of energy, his foot connected with the ball, unleashing a shot that burned like fire. The goalkeeper dove with everything he had, but the ball sailed cleanly into the top corner of the net. The entire team erupted in pure celebration, swarming Wooyoung to celebrate the miraculous goal that turned the tide of the entire tournament. On the balcony, the head coach took a final sip from his cup, a subtle look of satisfaction crossing his face as he realized they had found their genius midfielder. The sun began to set over Dongil High School, casting a warm golden glow across the quiet campus. Inside the athletic wing, the sign for the soccer team hung quietly, representing a legacy of intense pressure and high expectations. In the dim locker room, Jiangsu sat alone on the bench, his head bowed in deep contemplation. He rested his chin on his hand, the weight of his future decisions pressing heavily on his mind. He closed his eyes, visualizing the blinding light of the stadium and the explosive energy of a perfect match. Opening them again, a sudden spark of realization flashed across his face. He turned his attention to his laptop, where footage of a high-stakes match was paused on the screen. Crouching low on the bench, he studied the movements of the players with absolute focus. With a quick click of the mouse, he resumed the video, eager to analyze every single detail. His eyes widened in sheer disbelief as the name of Hyeongmin Son flashed across the screen. A nervous sweat broke out on his forehead, but a thrill of excitement quickly followed. On the screen, Hyeongmin moved with effortless grace, easily weaving through the opposing defense. Jiangsu stared intently, his competitive spirit fully ignited by the display of pure talent. He recognized that Hyeongmin was a completely different breed of attacker, one who didn't just score but dominated the entire field. With a firm tap, he closed the laptop, sealing his resolve for the challenges ahead. Jiangsu quickly looked up, startled by the sudden intrusion into his private study session. Later that evening, the lights of the massive apartment complex shone brightly against the dark night sky. At the dinner table, Jiangsu's father stared down at his spoon with a mixture of confusion and mild horror. His mother burst into cheerful laughter, trying to ease the thick tension that hung over the family meal. His father looked up, his eyes wide with surprise at his wife's sudden outburst. Jiangsu remained quiet, staring down at his bowl as he wrestled with his inner thoughts. His mother noticed his silence, her cheerful expression softening into one of deep concern. She looked at her son with a gentle, worried gaze, sensing the immense burden he was carrying. To reassure her, Jiangsu looked up and flashed a bright, confident smile. His father stared at him, momentarily taken aback by his son's sudden change in demeanor. Jiangsu laughed softly, assuring his parents that everything was going to be completely fine. Suddenly, his father's phone rang, and he answered it with an explosive shout of excitement. Jiangsu watched with a wry smile as his father eagerly listened to the voice on the other end. He chuckled nervously, realizing just how much his family's happiness rode on his soccer career. In that moment, a painful memory surfaced of a time when his mother had wept bitterly, holding him tightly after a devastating setback. Back in the present, his mother reached across the table and gently patted his hand. Jiangsu smiled through his emotions, a quiet tear of gratitude shining in his eye. His father continued to talk animatedly on the phone, his face lit up with pure joy. With the good news delivered, the family shared a warm, happy dinner together, the dark clouds finally parting. The next morning, Jiangsu was back on the pitch, running laps under the bright blue sky. He kept pace with his teammate, their footsteps rhythmically hitting the dirt field. His teammate, casually chewing on a lollipop, looked over with a relaxed and friendly grin. Jiangsu remained focused, his mind already analyzing the upcoming practice match. They continued their steady jog, the school building looming large in the background. In the distance, the rest of the team was already huddling together, preparing for the drill. His teammate spoke up, offering some casual advice about the team's current dynamics. Jiangsu listened quietly, glancing back at the main group with a thoughtful expression. He visualized the team's roster, mapping out the different factions and key players in his mind. He knew that to succeed, he would have to find his place among these highly competitive athletes. Suddenly, a vision of intense physical clashes and raw power flashed before his eyes. He imagined the fiery determination of the team's top players, their eyes burning with a desire to win. Jiangsu shielded his eyes from the bright sun, feeling the heat of the competition rising. He knew that on this field, only the strongest and most tactical minds would survive. Suddenly, the loud, booming voice of the head coach shattered his train of thought. The coach screamed across the field, pointing directly at the players to call out their mistakes. Jiangsu paused, looking back as the coach loudly called out his name. He and his teammate quickly picked up their pace, eager to show their readiness. They ran side by side, the casual atmosphere of the morning completely vanishing. His teammate flashed one last grin, confident in their ability to handle whatever the coach threw at them. Jiangsu tightened his expression, fully locking into his professional mindset. The bright sky above seemed to mirror the limitless potential of the journey ahead. The entire squad quickly lined up in perfect, disciplined rows on the green pitch. A heavy silence fell over the players as they stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the coach's next words. With their eyes locked forward, they prepared themselves for the grueling selection process that would decide their ultimate fate. The training ground of the elite academy stood nestled deep within the quiet mountains, bathed in the bright morning sun. From above, the pitch was a flurry of constant movement as players ran their morning drills with intense focus. Every kick was sharp and deliberate, a testament to the high caliber of athletes gathered at the facility. Amidst the disciplined rows, the young midfielder kept his eyes forward, absorbing the high-pressure atmosphere. It did not take long for one of the established players to approach him, clearly intent on testing the newcomer's resolve. With a smug grin, the rival player made it clear that he considered himself far superior to anyone else on the pitch. When the ball was finally played to him, the midfielder attempted to showcase his touch under pressure. He rose high to meet a looping pass, determined to prove he belonged among the elite. However, the physical intensity of the academy players caught him off guard, sending another defender sprawling. The midfielder found himself flat on his back, the harsh reality of the competition settling in. The rival player immediately walked over, looking down at him with an insufferable smirk. Catching his breath on the turf, the midfielder refused to let the intimidation get to his head. The shadow of his opponent loomed large, a silent promise of the difficult trials still to come. Instead of showing frustration, the midfielder offered a tight, resilient smile that caught his rival off guard. The whistle blew to signal the end of the warm-ups, leaving the ball resting quietly on the green grass. The coach quickly gathered the squad, dividing them into two distinct groups wearing red and blue bibs. Standing opposite each other, the midfielder found himself assigned to the red team, while his rival wore blue. Leaning in close, the blue player whispered a final, mocking warning before the match could even begin. The midfielder kept his gaze steady, refusing to engage in the petty mind games. He simply smiled, his quiet confidence speaking louder than any verbal retort ever could. The coach raised his voice, demanding absolute focus as he prepared to outline the tactical plan. Standing before the red team, the coach pointed out the specific roles each player would need to execute. He turned his attention directly to the midfielder, laying out the heavy expectations resting on his shoulders. Listening intently, the midfielder absorbed every detail, knowing this match was his chance to shine. The tactical board detailed a strategy of rapid transitions, designed to stretch the blue team's defense wide. Smacking his fist into his palm, the midfielder felt a surge of excitement as he prepared to take the field. He was ready to orchestrate the play, confident that his vision would unlock the opposing defense. defense. The whistle blew and the players immediately collided in a high-speed battle for possession. The physical play was relentless, with defenders using every trick to halt the opposition's progress. The blue team moved with impressive synergy, quickly advancing the ball up the pitch. The midfielder positioned himself perfectly, calling out for a pass to initiate the counterattack. But as the seconds ticked away, he realized with a sinking feeling that his teammates were actively ignoring him. He stood completely isolated in the center circle, a ghost on his own team. He looked around in disbelief, realizing that a silent boycott had been organized against him. Without his involvement, the red team struggled to maintain possession, leaving them vulnerable. A harsh tackle echoed across the pitch as the blue team launched another aggressive attack. One of the red defenders was sent sliding across the turf, unable to stop the momentum. Looking up from the grass, the fallen player saw a hand reaching down to help him up. It was an opponent from the blue team, offering a moment of unexpected sportsmanship amidst the fierce battle. Gratefully accepting the help, the defender pulled himself up, the tension momentarily easing. The blue player gave a quick wave before jogging back to his position, ready to resume the match. Watching the interaction, the midfielder realized how deeply divided his own team truly was. His teammates glanced back at him with cold, indifferent eyes, confirming his suspicions. His gaze narrowed as he processed the unfair treatment, a spark of anger igniting within him. He knew that complaining would achieve nothing in this cutthroat environment. A determined expression settled on his face as he made a silent vow to take control of his own fate. If his own teammates refused to pass him the ball, he would simply have to win it back himself. With his mind made up, he locked his eyes onto the ball, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He knew he had to break the deadlock and force his way into the game by any means necessary. As an opposing midfielder advanced, the midfielder launched himself forward in a perfectly timed slide tackle. The blue player looked on in shock, completely unprepared for the sudden, aggressive interception. With incredible speed, the midfielder secured the ball and immediately turned upfield. A fierce, competitive grin broke across his face as he felt the ball at his feet at last. He navigated through a sea of blue shirts, his precise dribbling leaving defenders chasing shadows. Spinning past another challenge, he opened up a clear lane toward the penalty box. He accelerated into the open space, his eyes firmly locked on the target ahead. The blue defenders scrambled to recover, but they were far too slow to react to his explosive burst. With a powerful swing of his leg, he unleashed a thunderous shot toward the top corner of the net. He watched with bated breath as the ball soared past the goalkeeper's outstretched hands. Time seemed to slow down as the ball sailed through the air, carrying all his hopes of proving his worth. The goalkeeper leapt desperately, but the sheer power of the strike left him completely beaten. But with a devastating metallic clang, the ball struck the crossbar and bounced harmlessly away. The midfielder dropped to his knees, clutching his head in absolute disbelief at the agonizing near miss. The memory of the physical toll and the isolation flashed through his mind, threatening to break his spirit. He stood alone on the vast pitch, watching his teammates walk away without a single word of encouragement. He forced himself back onto his feet, refusing to let the heavy weight of his past failures drag him down any longer. With a sudden burst of energy, he intercepted the ball and sent a crisp, low pass slicing across the turf. He sprinted forward immediately, his eyes locked onto the open space ahead as he called for the return pass. Every muscle in his body screamed from the intense pace, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through the exhaustion. The ball traveled perfectly between the defenders, tracing a beautiful line that completely bypassed their midfield line. Pausing for just a brief second to catch his breath, he wiped the sweat from his brow and focused on his positioning. The opposing team quickly recovered, passing the ball around with rapid, precise touches that kept his team on the defensive. He watched their movements closely, his mind working overtime to calculate their next passing lane. In his mind's eye, the movements of every player on the pitch began to glow, forming a complete tactical map of the field. An opponent suddenly closed in on him, using his physical strength to try and push him off his stride. But he simply smiled, recognizing that the defender's aggressive press had left a massive gap right behind them. With a subtle flick of his ankle, he tapped the ball directly into the path of his advancing teammate. He knew that to truly control the game, he had to remain one step ahead of everyone else's expectations. The defender lunged forward in a desperate attempt to block the pass, but his foot only met empty air. Another midfielder rushed over to cover the open space, his face tense with the realization of the danger. The opposing defenders scrambled backward, trying to reorganize their backline before it was too late. Looking up at the unfolding play, he felt a familiar surge of confidence washing over him. He struck the ball cleanly, sending a powerful drive forward that forced the defenders to stretch to their absolute limits. A quiet confidence settled over him as he realized his vision of the field was sharper than it had ever been. He burst forward with incredible acceleration, leaving his marker trailing helplessly in his wake. The sound of his boots thudding against the turf echoed through the indoor facility as he drove deep into the attacking third. He kept his head down, maintaining perfect control of the ball while scanning the box for any runners. Suddenly, a brilliant spark of inspiration flashed in his mind, illuminating the perfect path to goal. In that single moment, the entire pitch seemed to light up with pillars of golden energy, representing the ultimate passing lanes. A wide grin spread across his face as he prepared to execute the killer pass he had just visualized. He tapped the ball slightly to the side, shifting his body weight to deceive the defender standing directly in front of him. The defender braced himself for a shot, completely unaware that he was about to be thoroughly outmaneuvered. He squared up against his opponent, his eyes conveying an absolute certainty that he could not be stopped. With a swift, fluid motion, he glided past the defender as if he were nothing more than a training cone. He quickly spun around, checking his surroundings to ensure no other opponents were closing in from his blind spot. He brought the ball to a sudden halt under his foot, freezing the defenders in their tracks with his unpredictable change of pace. Before they could react, he surged forward once again, his movements a blur of pure speed and technical precision. He gritted his teeth as the physical toll of the match threatened to slow him down, but his determination remained unshaken. Suddenly, a massive, imposing shadow loomed directly behind him, radiating an intense and hostile pressure. The opposing team's ace defender closed in, his eyes glowing with a fierce, predatory red light. He could feel the defender's overwhelming aura, a dark force that had crushed many promising players before him. The defender lunged with terrifying speed, his foot enveloped in a dark red energy as he aimed to strip the ball away. It was a tackle designed to completely break his rhythm and steal his hard-earned momentum. But instead of panicking, he executed a lightning-fast slide, keeping the ball just out of the defender's reach. He looked up with a calm, knowing smile, completely unfazed by the defender's monstrous display of power. The ace defender's eyes widened in sheer shock as he realized his ultimate tackle had missed its target entirely. He knew that in this high-stakes environment, only those with absolute belief in their abilities could survive. With a powerful swing of his leg, he unleashed a thunderous shot that screamed toward the top corner of the net. The ball traveled with such incredible velocity that it left a blazing trail of golden light in its wake. The goalkeeper dived desperately, but the ball tore through the back of the net with a satisfying swish. Standing on the sidelines, the head coach watched the play unfold with a thoughtful, analytical expression. His teammates immediately rushed over to celebrate, wrapping their arms around him in absolute joy. He planted his foot firmly on the grass, feeling the solid ground beneath him as he prepared for the next play. His eyes burned with a renewed sense of purpose, his doubts completely erased by the brilliant goal. Across the pitch, a formidable opponent stood silently, his face cast in deep shadow as he stared back at him. As soon as the whistle blew, he dashed forward once again, eager to maintain his team's momentum. He smirked as he ran, fully embracing the thrill of playing at his absolute limit. He faced off against another defender, his body language relaxed but incredibly focused. With a deceptive drop of his shoulder, he easily cut past the defender and drove toward the penalty area. He prepared to strike the ball, his technique flawless as he locked his ankle for the shot. He unleashed a spectacular, curling effort that bent beautifully around the outstretched leg of the blocker. The defender could only watch in stunned silence as the ball defied gravity, spinning perfectly toward the target. A confident smile played on his lips as he watched the trajectory of his shot, knowing it was absolutely perfect. He turned back to look at his teammates, his eyes conveying a silent promise that they would win this match together. As his teammates ran to join him, he realized that he was no longer alone on this vast, challenging pitch. He stood face to face with a formidable new presence on the pitch, sensing an intense aura of competition. Memories of past struggles and the fierce battles of the selection camp flashed through his mind. Before he could dwell on those thoughts, the sound of heavy footsteps drew his attention back to the present. The tension between them was palpable as they locked eyes under the bright stadium lights. Extending a hand, the brown-haired player offered a gesture of mutual respect. He accepted the handshake, feeling the firm grip of someone who shared his burning passion for the game. Yet the sudden shift in his opponent's demeanor left him momentarily bewildered. With a confident grin, the midfielder began to explain his philosophy on what it truly meant to control the pitch. He watched in silence as the mysterious player turned and casually walked away, leaving behind more questions than answers. A subtle smirk played on the midfielder's lips as if he knew exactly how much of an impact his words had made. The sheer determination of the other athletes in the camp was unlike anything he had ever witnessed before. He realized that to survive in this environment, he would have to elevate his game to an entirely new level. The midfielder's playful confidence seemed to suggest that the real challenge was only just beginning. He could only offer a nervous smile, feeling the immense pressure of the national selection weighing heavily on his shoulders. During the practice match, he witnessed firsthand the incredible speed and tactical awareness of his peers. Every player fought desperately for a spot, shouting instructions and pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. The intensity of the play was breathtaking, with powerful shots lighting up the pitch like streaks of fire. Once the grueling session finally concluded, the team boarded the bus to head toward their next destination. Conversations filled the air as the players discussed the upcoming challenges that awaited them. Exhausted from the relentless training, he leaned back against his seat and let his eyes close. But the quiet chatter around him kept his mind racing with anticipation. His teammates busied themselves checking their phones, keeping up with news of the tournament. Others relaxed by listening to music, trying to find a moment of peace amidst the high-stakes environment. One of the veteran players offered to share his headphones, but he politely declined, preferring to stay with his thoughts. He looked over at his new rival, who seemed completely unfazed by the pressure of the journey. The realization of how far he had come made him feel a sudden wave of fatigue. He knew that the road ahead would only become steeper and more demanding. Seeing his teammates' relaxed attitude, however, brought a small sense of comfort. They began to converse casually, sharing stories of their previous matches and training regimes. For the first time in hours, he let out a sigh of relief, grateful for the brief respite. He remembered the precise moments on the pitch where his instincts had guided his feet perfectly. Every movement, every pass, and every run had to be calculated with absolute precision. Staring out the window, he watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. He envisioned the fierce opponents he would soon face, their eyes burning with the same desire to win. His own reflection in the glass reminded him of the promise he had made to himself. As the bus sped down the highway, the reality of the international stage drew closer with every passing mile. The next morning, the sharp blast of the coach's whistle signaled the start of another intense training day. He threw himself into the agility drills, his feet moving rapidly through the ladder on the grass. Pushing past his physical limits, he collapsed onto the turf, gasping for air. All around him, the other candidates were also putting everything they had into the drills. During a short break, he sat on the grass with his teammates, sharing a quiet moment of camaraderie. He watched as one of the forwards practiced his ball control, executing a flawless mid-air touch. A teammate offered him a cold drink, which he accepted with a grateful smile. The simple gesture of kindness reminded him that they were a team, despite the fierce internal competition. Taking a long sip, he watched the rest of the squad continue their relentless practice in the background. The coach gathered the players on the grass to deliver a crucial briefing about their destination. One of the players crouched down, listening intently while casually holding a snack. He leaned forward, hanging on every word as the coach explained the significance of the upcoming tournament. The announcement of the prestigious U-17 friendly tournament in Japan sent a wave of excitement through the group. He pondered the incredible opportunity to test his skills against international competition. The tournament was set to take place in Sendai, a city known for its passionate football culture. This event would serve as the ultimate proving ground before the highly anticipated U-17 World Cup in Nigeria. Seeing his teammates share a light-hearted moment, he felt his resolve harden. He clenched his hand into the grass, silently promising to seize this opportunity with everything he had. With a determined look in his eyes, he stood up, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Soon, they were in the air, flying across the sea toward the land of the rising sun. Upon arriving in Sendai, they were greeted by the majestic sight of the giant statue overlooking the bustling city. Walking through the vibrant streets, the players couldn't contain their excitement for the journey. Their guide adjusted his glasses with a knowing smirk, promising to show them the best local spots. Consulting a map of the city, they navigated the unfamiliar streets in search of a place to eat. The lively atmosphere of the city instantly lifted their spirits after the long journey. They eventually found a traditional ramen shop, the enticing aroma of broth drifting through the air. He eagerly lifted his bowl, savoring the rich, delicious flavor of the local Japanese cuisine. Setting down the empty bowl with a satisfying clack, he laughed heartily with his friends. Wiping his mouth, he felt completely refreshed and ready to take on the world. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted as his teammate looked up with a startled expression. A massive, imposing figure loomed over their table, casting a shadow of intense pressure. He swallowed hard, realizing that even the locals here possessed an incredibly powerful presence. Outside the shop, they witnessed a group of local youth playing an intense game of street soccer. One of the players moved with incredible grace and confidence, a bright smile on his face. He watched in awe, realizing the sheer depth of talent that existed in this country. The street player stopped the ball effortlessly under his foot, locking eyes with the visiting athletes. A spark of competitive fire ignited within him, knowing that the battle for glory had officially begun. The crowd gathered around the court, whispering in anticipation of the impromptu match. The challenger stood confidently, spinning the soccer ball in his hand with an easy grin. Knowing the stakes, the protagonist's companion stepped forward to warm up, preparing to defend their honor. The protagonist looked on, feeling a sudden wave of pressure as he realized the caliber of their opponent. With a confident smirk, the street player held the ball high, challenging them to take it from him. He laced up his shoes tightly, preparing for a battle of pure agility and speed. Cracking his knuckles, the protagonist stepped up beside his teammate, ready to face the challenge head-on. The two players faced each other in the center of the ring, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The challenger's eyes locked onto his target, his smile widening with the thrill of the upcoming duel. Without warning, he burst forward, his movements incredibly sharp and explosive. The protagonist braced himself, his eyes tracking every shift in the opponent's weight. The ball remained glued to the challenger's feet as he surged forward with terrifying speed. But before they could even react, the street player had already danced past them, posing with the ball under his foot. The protagonist blushed in embarrassment, realizing they had been completely outclassed in the very first exchange. Determined not to let it end so easily, the challenger prepared for another run, his focus intensifying. It was a true clash of wills, a test of who possessed the superior instincts on the concrete. With a quick tap of his foot, the opponent initiated his next sequence of dizzying feints. His shoes squeaked against the rough ground as he shifted his weight in the blink of an eye. The ball moved like a blur, slipping through the narrowest gaps with effortless precision. Every touch was deliberate, designed to keep the defenders completely off balance. He dashed past once more, leaving the defenders struggling to keep up with his pace. The protagonist could only smile in disbelief at the sheer level of street talent before him. They ran side by side, a fierce gust of wind trailing behind their rapid movements. A sudden swoosh of the foot attempted to intercept, but the ball was already gone. The digital timer ticked down rapidly, leaving them with only 30 seconds to make a play. The rule of the game was simple: steal the ball before the time ran out. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist chased after him, refusing to give up until the final second. After the intense round, the two players caught their breath, exchanging words of mutual respect. His companion stretched his neck, admitting that the street player's skills were truly on another level. He raised his hands in defeat, acknowledging that they had a long way to go. But the battle wasn't over yet, as the next challenger stepped up to face the master. The street player smiled, welcoming the next opponent with open arms. He dashed forward once again, his movements just as explosive as before. Crouching low to the ground, he kept the ball perfectly shielded from any potential tackle. His red pants blurred as he executed a series of rapid step-overs. Every movement was calculated, leaving no room for error. The defender watched in absolute shock, unable to predict the next move. With a sharp skid, the street player changed direction instantly, leaving his opponent in the dust. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, his focus never wavering for a single moment. Suddenly, the defender's aura shifted, a massive, shadowy spider appearing behind him as his defensive instincts flared. Sensing the sudden change in pressure, the street player gritted his teeth, realizing this wouldn't be an easy victory. He quickly tapped the ball, trying to maneuver around the tightening web of defense. With a powerful strike, he sent the ball forward, hoping to break through the line. The protagonist watched from the sidelines, his heart pounding at the sheer intensity of the match. The two players clashed in a flurry of motion, neither side willing to yield an inch. The defender managed to read the play, his eyes widening as he anticipated the trajectory. He pressed his foot firmly onto the ball, stopping the street player's momentum in its tracks. But with a quick tap, the street player managed to flick it away just in time. The ball thumped against the ground as it flew past the defender's outstretched leg. He watched in awe as the ball soared over his head, completely out of reach. It was a perfect lob, demonstrating a level of control that defied belief. The ball spun gracefully through the air, landing perfectly on the other side. The street player smiled, confident in his victory as the match drew to a close. However, his smile quickly faded into shock as he realized the defender was still moving. With a sudden burst of speed, the defender recovered, chasing down the loose ball with incredible tenacity. The protagonist gasped, completely amazed by the relentless spirit of both players. As the game concluded, the protagonist walked over, bowing deeply to show his immense respect. The street player chuckled and handed over a 1,000-yen bill, keeping his promise. The protagonist and his companion looked at the bill with bright smiles, thrilled by the hard-earned reward. They bowed once more in gratitude, thanking him for the invaluable lesson. The street player looked on with a warm expression, glad to have met such passionate young athletes. Suddenly, a tall, long-haired player approached them, waving casually as he entered the court. The street player pointed at him in surprise, recognizing the newcomer immediately. The long-haired player offered a calm smile, his presence alone commanding respect. The two veterans faced off, a silent understanding passing between them as they prepared for their own match. Crossing his arms, the newcomer watched as the street player packed up his gear, ready to move to a bigger stage. He zipped up his bag, closing this chapter of his street playing days. The sun began to set over the city, casting a warm, golden glow over the bustling streets. With a final, determined smile, the player knew that his true journey was only just beginning. Sometime later, the protagonist found himself standing in a massive stadium, lined up alongside his national teammates. Wearing the proud red jersey of the national team, he stood tall, ready to represent his country on the grandest stage. His expression was serious, his eyes filled with the determination of a true professional. The The referee's whistle blew, signaling the start of the match that would define his career. The players kicked off, the green pitch stretching out before them under the bright stadium lights. Facing the immense pressure of the international stage, the protagonist held his head, feeling the weight of millions of expectations. But as he clenched his teeth and looked ahead, he knew that every challenge he had faced on the streets had prepared him for this very moment.